Part 2 of the Yiddish personality series. This week, are you a Yenta or a Yachna, a Meshugenneh or a Mensch? It brings a smile to my face because this is my mother tongue and it has its own flavor, its own texture, its own personality and culture, these words. I received very interesting and intriguing and extremely positive feedback to last week's when we spoke about the Shlemiel, the Shlemazel, and the Nudnik. So now we're covering Yente, Yachna, Mentch, Meshugenneh, and Mensch. And I want to make the big disclaimer right in the beginning, so make sure this is not personal in any way, God forbid. It's not about attacking or criticizing or judging or dismissing any one of these characters. These are words, these are archetypes. Each one of us has most likely elements of every type of these personalities. And it's a good way also to look at yourself in a more humorous way, a light way, and to laugh at ourselves at times. So definitely not meant to categorize or stereotype or in any way put anyone in a particular box. And yet at the same time, some of these words, some of these titles can end up describing who we are or people we know. And I just wanted to make sure it's not used in any derogatory way. So I'm not saying that for legal purposes, I'm just saying it out of my heart and my menschlichkeit that I try to convey using a word that we'll be discussing, something that we need to be cordial and civil and kind to each other, despite being able to also look at our quirky sides and our different kinks and our different eccentricities, proclivities, the different words we can use to describe the bizarreness of human nature. The Jewish people throughout history have gone through a lot in life, so they developed their own words and language. So let's talk about the Yente or the Yachne. So Yente is a more popular term. People know about it more than a Yachne. But Leo Rastin says it's not so easy to distinguish between the two in his book, The Joys of Yiddish. But I will try to. So the Yente, some people see as the gossipy one, the gossipy person. Another can't hold a secret. Another is a meddler. They're always trying to find out what Yenta. What are you busybody trying to always find out what's going on, meddling in areas that don't belong to them. So we go gossipy, can't keep a secret, meddling, Yenta. For some reason, it's been associated more with women than with men. When frankly, both of people, male or female, can be Yentas. And sometimes a Yenta is used in a positive way, like the guy that says to his friend, I want to really get the word out there. So he says, so what's the best way? He says, I know the local Yenta. I'm going to tell her or him, and I'm sure it's going to get it. I'll tell them it's a secret. Make sure you keep it as a secret. That way everybody will be sure that everybody knows about it. Political cynics or political handlers often say the best way to spread a rumor is by denying it, by getting up and saying, regarding those rumors, regarding so-and-so, it's all untrue. It's the best way to get something going. So yeah, there are individuals, and as I said in a lighthearted way, they are people you can rest assured they will never keep a secret. They always keep it with a certain intrigue, but make sure that the word gets out there. So Yenta is not necessarily seen in a positive light. The Yenta dvosha, sometimes the word is used. I'm not sure the dvosha gets in there, but Yenta is that type of person again. Gossipy, can't keep a secret, meddling, Yenta. A person who's the opposite of Yenta are usually very discreet and really do keep a secret. They say in the Yiddish world, they also say that there are three types of people. There are people who can't keep a secret, period. There are people who can keep a secret, but there's a secret. You know that they're carrying a secret. And there's the third, which is you don't even know that they're carrying a secret. There's that discreet. So the Yenta is that individual. Often in a shtetl, there was always the local Yenta, the local, sometimes kochlefel they called it. But a kochlefel is a little different, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in another episode. Kochlefel is more like a cooking, the spoon that you mix, the ladle that you mix any soup or chont or any type of food. Person who gets things going, but that's different than a Yenta. So let's just keep that as separate. So there we have the Yenta. Now what about the Yachne? The Yachne, as I said, lesser used word, but those that know Yiddish use it, Yachne. Yachne sometimes is seen as someone who's a real, detective Yenta. Think of a detective Yenta, someone who really gets involved and wants to probe in every detail. A Yenta could be someone who's meddling but it's in a more, I don't want to say superficial, but not that. But then there's someone, a Yachna, really in every given area, and sometimes used in a very derogatory way, in a negative way. The Yachne. Yente is sometimes seen more almost in an endearing way. The Yente. The Yachne is not so necessarily endearing, even though I did find that sometimes the other way around. A Yachne is not seen as so threatening as a Yenta. Yachne. A Yachne is a person who likes to always be involved in things and always immersed and crossing boundaries where you shouldn't be crossing boundaries and stuff like that. But what does that tell us about human nature? So, of course, gossip is part of our human condition. People like to gossip. They like to talk about others. Obviously, it's not a very, let's call it a proud feature. But why do people gossip? I've always thought about it. Is it because we're just lazy and we just don't mind just talking about things? Is it easy? Does it make us feel better when other people, let's say, when we talk about the negative stuff of other people, makes us feel not so bad about our own stuff? Is it that? Do we have a nature that sometimes we'd like to spread or dwell upon other people's challenges? It's a hard thing to quantify because you sometimes see people who gossip who are not necessarily malicious individuals. They're not necessarily people who are looking to hurt someone. It's almost in passing. But it's still not considered to be a positive thing. In Judaism, in Torah thought, gossip is considered something that is really, you should stay away, like Lashon Hara, speaking evil, or in any way gossiping or slandering. Gossip doesn't always mean slander where you say something false about someone. Gossip means you're talking about someone that there's no need to talk about. And it's a quality that we should not necessarily be advancing. So the Yenta per se, even though the personality type is a certain, we can smile at it, but it's not exactly very laudable and complimentary to be a Yenta. Especially when you talk about the other things, a Yenta in the sense where they meddle or they don't know how to keep a secret. As I said, they may have some advantages, but in the general picture of things, it's a good way to look at yourself. Do you have Yenta qualities in you? Do you have Yachna qualities in you? You know, I want to say about Yachna as well, my own sense of it. They say Yachna is yeah, I think the non-boundary issue is a big one with the Yachna. It's like a person who is in places they shouldn't always be. Let's put it that way. Sometimes, just thinking out loud here. Yeah, that type of individual that you always see in places and you always wonder what they're doing there, but then you come to realize that's their type of personality. And so it's not quite as meddling, but just being involved in more where than they should be involved. So asking ourselves these questions are good to, in a sense, time of refining ourselves, character awareness, self-awareness, character development, personality refinement, something we all should be doing. At the same time, as I said, there is a lighter side to all these characters, to all these archetypes, and we need to keep that in mind as well. Okay, let's talk now about the second half of our discussion about Meshugana, Mensch, and Mensch. They're not really antithetical to one another. They both begin with an M, but the Meshugana. Now, Meshugana, of course, everyone says is a crazy person. You know, Meshugana means to do something crazy, or Meshugana, the crazy. There was the local crazy, a local idiot, or something like that. Something you do that's not rational, irrational, and used in a light way, it has a certain endearing element as well. Used in a negative way, it's actually very dismissive to call somebody a Meshugana, a crazy person. But there is that idea. I want to share a story. It's a story that comes from my own childhood, from my own culture. So, you know, every town, every city has what they call the Shtat Meshugana. Shtat Meshugana is usually a person that's either a bachelor, it's often actually more men than women, even though it could be a woman as well. They often don't have a family, don't have a home, but they're there. And sometimes they're like a regular. They're almost like the part of the furniture. Every community has such individuals. When they say Meshugah here, you mean not necessarily mental illness, because that of course is something to be very careful to call someone that, even if they're in that category. Here, Meshugana is like an expression of a person who's not living a normal, an ordinary life. Now, sometimes it could be also something that is something's the matter with them. In the old shtetl, I don't know if they clinically diagnose people by using the word Meshugana, Because if they were not destructive, they were not dangerous to themselves or to others, some people are wired a little different, a little strange, a little odd. People have that thing. So we're not talking here as it is today. It's far more clinical, far more diagnosable, far more treatable, medicine, medication, therapy, and other factors. So there's the Shtat Meshugenneh in the city of Lubavitch, which was a small town in white Russia, Belarus. There was also, his name was Yankel the Meshugenneh. Yankel the Meshugenneh was his name. They called him that. It was not even considered to be a dismissive thing, but he was that guy. I don't even know if he lived in a particular place. He was there. People saw him. They smiled at him. He was part of their lives. Every town, as I said, had one or two like that. One day, from another city, Vitebsk or some other city, a smaller city, Vitebsk was not just a small city, maybe wherever it may have been, a guy called Shmerel the Meshugenneh from that town meets Yankel. They had a certain language that they only speak to each other. People could only they're the only ones that could understand that language. And he says, I've been here in my town for so long. You've been so long in your town. Why don't we come together? Let's move to a city like Minsk, or a city, a big city. With change of climate, change of venue, change of environment, change of people. Just let's broaden our horizons. That would be modern vernacular, but they said it in their own way. Yankel says to him, look, I can't do anything without speaking to my Rebbe. I have a Rebbe. The Rebbe was the Rebbe Marash at the time, the fourth Chabad Rebbe in Lubavitch. Let me consult with my Rebbe, which is also not such a Meshugenneh thing if you think about it. So, but nobody's there. So he knows that the secretary of the Rebbe is not going to let him in to see the Rebbe because they don't want anyone nudging the Rebbe and stuff like that. So he comes up with an idea. He's going to wait when the Rebbe comes out, the leader of the community. The Rebbe is a leader, Hasidic leader, respected, revered. When the Rebbe is coming out from his home and he's traveling somewhere in a carriage, so on his way to the wagon, to the carriage, a buggy, he will run over and ask his question. Anyway, that's what he does. He hides in the bushes. He sees the Rebbe walking out, and he runs right over to him. Before anybody knows, he's already right by the carriage with the Rebbe. The Chassidim come over, and they're looking to separate and schlep him away. So the Rebbe leave him alone. Yankel, what can I do for you? In Yiddish, they're speaking, of course. What can I do for you? I have a question. Shmerel from this and this town came to see me. He suggested that we both go and move. And the Rebbe said to him, so he says to the Rebbe, I want to know what your opinion is. The Rebbe says to him, Yankel, you belong here. You don't have to go anywhere else. Anyway, okay. The Rebbe goes off. The Chassidim came over. They said, what happened? Well, they want to know what happened. So he says, I asked the Rebbe whether I should, career change. I don't know if you call it a career change, location change, move his business elsewhere, the business of whatever he was, the local, I don't call it idiot, like the court jester or whatever you want to call it. And they said, so what happened? And the Rebbe said to me, your place, uncle, is here. So he said, what are you going to do? He says, of course I'm going to stay. Meshugah, b'seichel daf man haben. That's what he said. Crazy, but you have to have seichel. Seichel is another Yiddish word. You have to be smart. You have to be wise. So what do you see from this? That Meshugenneh, in this sense, yes, is maybe a little out of the pale, off color. There's always people like that. I remember in school you always have individuals like that. On one hand, they could sometimes be bullied, unfortunately. They could be dismissed. They're marginalized. But they add a certain flavor to life. And again, if it's not destructive, or they, for themselves or others, that's how they are. That's how they are. That's how people are wired. Obviously, if one can help improve someone's life, and it's not like dismissing them and saying it's too late, but it's still understanding. And I go a little deeper. In Hasidic thought, there's a concept called holy insanity. And there's a concept called unholy insanity. In other words, you can do something crazy that is destructive to you. For the moment, some throw of passion, you get into the throes of passion that seduce you, you do something that's completely irrational. The expression is called shtus de le'umazeh. Shtus de sitr achra. It's a unhealthy, an unholy and unhealthy form of insanity. You may even know while you're doing it that it's not healthy for you, it's destructive, it'll hurt you, it'll hurt your family, but you end up doing it. But there's a way to counter that. You counter that by doing something that's holy insanity, doing something that's not so strategized, not so rational, it's beyond, super rational. That even though a calculation may not be the thing that is purely logical to do, but you do it, you go out of your own limits. In a good way, in a powerful way. Like when you dance uncontrollable. The Talmud brings a story about one of the great sages, how he would dance in an uncontrollable way at a person's wedding. So you could say, what are you dancing like that? You go for a small dance, a short dance, in a balanced way. But there's an element of just breaking out. And that's called a Meshugas of Kedusha, of holiness, holy craziness. It reminds me of a story. The Baal Shem Tov was once praying for a woman who had a child that was very ill, and nothing was helping. The doctors had given up hope. So he brought together 10 what they called tzaddikim nestorim. He concealed the hidden righteous people. He brought them together. They were praying, saying psalms, to no avail. Did not succeed. The child is getting sicker. So Baal Shem Tov realizes he has the last resort. He has a trick up his sleeve where he goes, when he's desperate, when all else fails, he packs a bag, walks out to the forest, goes to a certain particular part that nobody ever goes to. It's very dangerous. That's where the highwaymen and the bandits are always hanging out. Their den, the liar's den or the thieves' den, whatever it's called. And he says to them, listen, guys, he comes over to them, and the head of the band is saying, what can I do for you? The Baal Shem Tov knew these people, because he had these backdoor connections, so to speak, and when necessary. He says, Baal Shem Tov, what are you doing here? He says, I must have your help. What do you need? He says, I need 10 of you to come with me to the shul, and we're going to daven, pray for this child. Okay, anything for you, Baal Shem Tov. And they agreed. They came, take 10 thieves, the best ones, they pray, and lo and behold, the heavens were pierced, and the child healed. So afterwards, the students of the Baal Shem Tov said, 1 second, you brought 10 righteous people, and didn't succeed. 10 thieves? Plain thieves? He said, yes, because I saw that all the gates in heaven were locked, and I needed someone to break in. Now, this is not advocating, let's make it clear, theft, burglary, crime. Let's get that clear. But there's a certain spiritual sense. He needed someone who doesn't go by the rules, because there was a desperate situation. So I hope everyone understands the subtlety of that. Again, it's not justifying. It's not even finding merit in it. It's just that sometimes you need to do something meshugah. When desperate times, you need desperate measures. So there's a time that we need to have a certain mishugas, and not always be. In crazy times, you have to do something crazy. Steve Jobs' line, everybody quoting, comes from Jewish thought, even though he may or may not have known it. He said only those that are crazy, only the ones that are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that will change the world. You need sometimes to go out of the pure mathematical, rational, logical structure of things. Then you come up with breakthroughs. So in the same sense, there's what we call the normal spectrum of behavior. And there's, of course, below normal, which can be negative and destructive. But there's sometimes above normal. Knowing something not always, and sometimes these Meshugennehs that we talk about have that element. So though, yes, it's a part of us that we need to look at, and sometimes you need to temper it, but sometimes you actually need to access it. Then comes the Mensch. Now, Mensch, of course, has become very popular. Are you a Mensch? Menschlichkeit. It's a word that's even better than just saying civil, kind, gracious. It's a word that captures more than one feature, just a full person, that's just a Mensch. You say that person's a Mensch, a person you can rely on, a person who will acknowledge a mistake. The ego does not drive them. They're just overall balanced and menschlich in their behavior. I can't even find the right words. I say menschlich. I'm sure you know what I mean. But let's see if I can decipher it a bit more. It's just all around, it's something it's a person that we all admire in a way. And when you hear someone's a mensch, you right away feel it's a person I can speak to. What's the opposite of a mensch? So the worst opposite, of course, is someone that's just an obnoxious, ostentatious person who's distasteful. You don't want to be around. Someone who does not acknowledge a favor. Someone who's very insecure, but sometimes masquerades as an arrogant person when really it's just concealing their own fears. Their whole being, everything is complicated. A mensch is someone that is the opposite. You go to a mensch, you ask him for something, he'll say, I can do this, I'll try to do it. There'll always be something that you can, no surprises in the negative. Again, reliability, trust, a Mensch you can trust. And it's more than just a behavior, it's a state of being. It's a human being that's a Mensch. He did the menschlich thing. For example, let's say you have an argument with someone, and you may be right or wrong. The other person may be right, and you may be wrong. A Mensch will sometimes overlook and compromise, even though they know they're right. They'll just be a Mensch. It's going beyond the letter of the law. It's not everything has to be exactly right or wrong. Sometimes it's not about who's right. It's something what is good for the cause, what's good for the family. A Mensch, of course, plays supreme and prominent in a marriage, in a relationship. Being with a Mensch, it's not about, we're going to start fighting tit for tat. You did this, and I'll reciprocate. A Mensch will always be that individual, will go out of their way, they'll initiate, and it won't all be calculated. 10 favors for 10 favors, etc., etc. So it's a whole different category. Just as I said, talking about different personality types, and that's the Mensch. Now, of course, we always aspire to be a Mensch. Everyone has a Mensch within them. Everyone has a Mensch. Often children will learn from parents who are not behaving necessarily menschlich, in a kind way, in a gracious way, in a appropriate way, and then they begin to be the worst. A non-Mensch, you'll hear an Mensch, a non-Mensch. We know that the Aryans, just to mention it as an aside, and based on Nietzsche, had the Ubermensch, the Superman, which of course was extremely racial and very negative. Here we're not talking about Uber. Be a regular Mensch. And to conclude on that note, they always say they were there, a synagogue was looking for a chazan, a cantor. So they were getting referrals. And one guy said, "This is a cantor." What was the expression they said? Anyway, it was like a tongue in cheek, and they said about the cantor that he sings like Moshe Rabbeinu. Moses, of course, didn't have a good voice. He has a voice like Moshe Rabbeinu. I forgot the other expressions, but the last one was, and he's a malach. He's probably a malach, an angel. Later, when they've hired him, they thought all these qualities. He has a voice like Moshe Rabbeinu. He knows how to communicate like they basically used an example of someone who didn't know how to communicate. And he's perhaps an angel. They hired him. He realized he didn't have any qualities. They said, "But why'd you call him an angel?" He said, "Because a Mensch is for sure not." So a Yiddish way of instead of saying an insult, they just say he's not a Mensch, he's a malach, not a Mensch. So being a Mensch is a type of that humane person who you can interact with, you just feel good about, and it's more than the sum of the parts. So my friends, we covered here little Yente, Yachne, Meshugenneh, Mensch, and with the goal, of course, is to be able to smile at these different characteristics, look at ourselves, see where we are in one area, what we can build, what we can grow, become more of a Mensch, use Meshugas when necessary, not when not necessary. And the Yente, Yachne, I would probably try to minimize in ourselves. It sometimes has an element when you, instead of being someone that's completely locked up, you see something happening, sometimes it's good to get involved and not just say, "Hey, it's not my problem." But I wouldn't call that a Yenta. I would say that's more of a concerned, responsible citizen. So I hope you continue to enjoy it, as I continue to enjoy presenting this. And I'd love to hear your feedback, your thoughts. I'm sure there are more translations, interpretations. I heard from some of you, reminded you of things you heard from your grandmother, from your grandfather, from parents. So please share, because at the end of the day, this is a language that's very mobile, very flexible, very dexterous, I would say. It doesn't have locked, tight names. Every one of these words I use can be explained in many different ways. That's the beauty of it. It expands and diminishes. It shapes itself according to the different human conditions and different times we live in and the different cultures and different environments. So this has been Rabbi Jacobson, Meaningful Live, the Yiddish Personality Series, and we continue. And it's all archived, so you can find it at meaningfullife.com is our central website where you can find all our activities, our programs, a robust menu of different options. And please share, like, subscribe, everything that helps the word get out there. Let's have this ripple effect of being able to smile while also being serious when need to be, and try to create a more beautiful, more lighter, a more gracious menschliche environment, as we all are indispensable musical notes in this grand composition called life. Everyone be well. Thank you.